Hi everyone, Andy Lewis here again with some cable repair video. So right now we're working on this Raven that we're got some important stuff coming up. So we're redoing a lot of the cables that we're starting to get a little too well used. We're gonna start here with the elbow with the capstan side, and we're gonna start with these two cables. We have the screw cable, which is we cut to 8.75 inches, and then the eyelet cable, which we cut to 10.75 inches, and then we use the old cable to be able to get the loop to about the right spot. And so on this green arm, we're going to start with that cable, gonna hook it around the screw, tighten that most of the way down. It just needs to stay in there, so it doesn't really need to clamp it down too much. And then ideally we cut it to the point, or if you want to come around here, where the eyelet crimp should be sitting on the flat part there. We're gonna come around, get that to about the middle, and then we're gonna be threading down, I believe, on this side. Actually, it doesn't matter too much on the first one, since we can kind of do it as we like. You'll see here that we're leaving this one intact, and hopefully that won't screw this too much. I think we put this in, I'm gonna come around that way, and then we like to hook back around when we insert it into the hole. So it's gonna come around like this, and then we're gonna fold it back in order to put it into the slot. So it'll look kind of backwards when we put it in like this. One thing that we made sure of when we were getting this all set up was that the pinion here was situated so that the small set screw was on the flat of the axle there, and so we can make sure that it's a nice tight connection between these two pinions. So we've got it into there. We're going to use the 1.5 millimeter Allen to tighten that down. And since we cut it to about the right length, we can expect that the other side should be able to take up a decent amount of that slack. So now we hook that back around, tighten it a bit so that it won't fall off again, and then it should look okay if we tighten it up by hand just at first here. So what we kind of want to see is that there's 2 or 3 wraps left for the other cable when it's all the way in. When the elbow is kind of all the way in like this. So this is about at its joint limit, and we've got a few more wraps for the other cable to fit in there. And that's pretty much what we see. And then if we pull it all the way out to the other side, we still have at least one full wrap before the cable termination. So that means that our length is about right. Again, 10.75 inches, and then with the eyelet about the same size as the other one. And that eyelet is about half an inch long from the tip to the end of the crimp. Next, we're going to make sure that the nut is on the screw before we put it into the hole, or else we have to take it all back out again. And now this is going to be the tricky bit where we have to wind this all back up again and kind of keep it in place so that we can wind the other cable onto it. So we're going to cut here, do some magic, and come back. Welcome back to the new portrait mode. We've done a little magic where we're just holding the elbow together with a piece of tape across, and then trying to keep the axle from moving with another piece of tape. So now we've put our screw side in. We're gonna wrap that around the end here, and then wrap that and try to squeeze it into the hole. So unlike before when we tried to go around and then double back, it's kind of a pain to do that here, and I don't think it's totally necessary, so we're gonna just go kind of in line with the rotations. I'm also gonna see if we can't get a little bit fancy by inserting it in. Make sure the set screw is pretty well removed so we're not running into that as we put it in. Don't fray out the cable as it goes in. And it's in like that, coming out the other side. Kind of get it back in. Then if we can put a twist on it, we might be able to figure this out. Yeah, so we want it to go down like that, and then over like that. Hopefully that was a little clear. And now we try to push through whatever slack we can. We want to take up as much of this slack as we can before we start using this screw, just so that we have plenty to play with once everything's all cut. And so I'm going to use these forceps that we have, grab on the end of that, and then just try to pull it safely if we can. And see if we can't work some of the slack from the other side out and wiggle that so it wants to go through. I think that's probably about as much as we're going to get. Go back to our 1.5 millimeter and tighten that down pretty good. Over here, tighten on the other side. All right, undo this, and we can take our tape off now and see how it feels. Don't use duct tape, that'll leave residue on. This masking tape is usually pretty good. Or painter's tape, if you've got it. So now we should be able to play with it and see that it goes through its full range of motion. It doesn't bind up on itself too much, and it's got plenty of wraps to keep itself from tearing out if we put too much power on. There's definitely still some slack on here, and as we play with it more, we'll expose more slack and we can take that up. But for now, we remember push on the end of the screw and just put that back. If you have one of the early robots with a really small nut there, it might be good to find a larger nut to be able to spin that a little easier. This is an 832, and these are vented 832 screws. They're on McMaster if you need some more, or just get in touch with me, Andrew at Applied Dexterity. And I think for this video, that's the top of the elbow. Howdy, welcome back. We're going to continue on with recabling the elbow here. Only one side, or so the motor side of this cable, or this system, has two separate cables, and so when this broke, only one side needs fixing. However, the other side got all sorts of loose. So we're going to start by tightening up this side of the system, and then we'll add the new cable in and get that in nice and tight. So I've already brought the elbow into its extreme so that we can make sure this is nicely situated, and then I'm going to hold this kind of taut while my helpful camera operator here is going to hold these brakes so that I can spin the motor spindle to be able to wind the cable back up. So if you want to go ahead and do that, I'm just going to use my thumb to spin this up, and we can let it stay kind of messy, and we'll neaten it up as it becomes necessary. So I'm watching this other end by the elbow to make sure that when we get enough of the cable around, then we need to make sure that the cable starts going on the proper path. We'll before we tighten it up too much. So we've still got a decent amount still in the system. So we'll keep going. Stop. All right, after fixing a few things, tightening things up a bit backscene, we've got it running from this capstan here, in plane with the back plane of the arm here, back down and around to the motor where we've neatly wrapped it up. So in this case, when the elbow is all the way in like this, all of this cable is all the way in, and we've still got at least about 1.5 wraps on the pinion still. So now we're going to go ahead and add in our next cable. We've already cut it to length, or what I think is about the right length. This is about 3.5 feet, and we'll be able to cut from the end if it's a little bit too long. So I think we are going to start by putting it in the pinion, the elbow side first. And I think that's the right decision. I'll let you know at the other end if the other side would have been a little bit easier. But for this one, we're going to take out the smaller set screw with our 0.9mm screwdriver, Allen wrench, place the end in here, push out the old cable end, and then go ahead and tighten that up. We'll be playing with the tension from the other side so that we don't have to come back in and cut here. So now we put this in the opposite direction of the other cable, which means that we also need to double back like the cable does over here. So we'll start by pushing it through, getting it around. We want to make sure not to wrap it around any of the other cables that might still be on the robot. And so here's that doubling back that we were talking about. So now we're going to wrap a decent amount. So starting from the other side might have been a little bit easier. So then we could have done just the two that we needed here and then all the rest in the motor. But holding the elbow out that far is a bit more difficult. So I suspect we'll need at least 5 or 6 wraps. But if we go until the other one, then that'll be a decent amount. This is a part where it might be handy to have a friend to help you out. Yeah, Melody, if you want to just hold it right there, put your finger right on there, and then that lets me put that through a little bit easier. And make sure not to wrap around that finger. Cool. All right, if you want to let go there, I'm just going to realign some of these cables. Okay, well, it looks like I actually tied a knot on here, so we're going to undo that a little bit. Yeah, it's not making sure to go over Melody's hand here. Yeah. Okay. This one's actually going over that one. So if you're having trouble keeping all these cables straight, don't feel bad, you're not the only one. Go ahead and just taking these out to make sure that I'm not wrapping it around itself poorly. Cool. All right, and in. You lift your finger there. Perfect. Thanks. Okay. And lift your finger in the back. Good. So that's 3 wraps or so. Okay, and then in the back there. Yeah, make sure you're not going over that cable there. Things get messy afterwards if you do. That one. Then we're gonna neaten those cables out a little bit. Now that we've gotten, can I get in the back here? Clean these cable teeth, and then yeah. So I guess one more wrap should do us. Okay. You know what? I'm gonna do it another one just to be safe. I think we have enough cable, and I'd really rather be a little bit long than a little bit short.
Oh, should it go?
What's, oh yeah, good call. All right, so now this is the strap around. We want to come out around the front. You can go ahead and let go, Melody. Yeah, that looks pretty good on this side. Now, let's see if we can get this to the front. There we go. So now we're going to push it around those pulleys on the front, just like we do on the tool cable, and maintain some tension so that they don't pull off. Like that. Then get that into the second pulley. Pull it forward a little bit. Again, try not to tangle this around any of the other cables. Pull that through. And then, Melody, can you just hold this tight, just like that, and I'll run the other side. Okay, got it. Now we're going to try to thread it through here and get it through that first pulley. Yeah, go ahead and pull that. Okay, good. Hold that tight while I come back around. Got it. Now push this back. And all right. So now we're going to go back to the motor and start winding it up. This should be going in front of the other cables that are still on here. If you have more cables, then you need to pay a little bit more attention to make sure you're not wrapping around those. And then, Cool. So since we have all of the cable we should need on the other end, we only need to do between 2 and 4 wraps on this side. And yeah, before we get too far, I'm gonna take the top clamp off so that we can have it when we need to place it on at the end. Make sure not to lose that plate there. Put it somewhere tidy. And then start wrapping. Oop. Thank you. So that's 2 wraps so far. Let's see if we can't get 4. Thanks. 3. And 4. Great. So now is one of the tricky bits. If I can, I prefer to start from this end and finish on the other end, just because this last step of getting the clamp on can be a bit of a pain. So on these older robots, the clamp hole is a little smaller, so you need to thread it on a little bit before hitting it. Yeah. Do you want to stop this? Okay, so now we've got it to the back of this screw here. I'm going to try to keep the groove end further down and see if we can't hook that just right. So here's kind of a delicate part. You want to make sure it's in nice and straight so you don't strip these screws. I'm just going to double check that the groove is on the bottom. I believe it is. And the cable's well placed underneath it. Cool. And now pretty tight, but not tight enough to strip out those threads, especially in one of these older robots. And then we should be good. Another thing that I noticed that we should have fixed previously is that this tensioning screw is out pretty far, which means that we won't really have much to play with on the other side. So we're going to see if we can't. Wow, that is weirdly tight. I want to go ahead and stop here. If this back end is pretty tight, go ahead and just click the brakes a bit and it should settle back into place. So now we can move the tensioner back, use our fingers to unscrew. Okay, with just a few millimeters left, that's pretty good. So now we have all this slack that we want to pull up. So we'll hit the brakes again and get it onto this side that we have the most control over at the moment. So I'm just going to pull here to try to tighten that up a lot. This back end should be fairly tight. And now we're going to loosen the screw a little bit, just so we can pass some cable underneath it. And now try to kind of push that slack through to this end. And now that should be pretty tight. If we want to, we can even unhook at this bit and take just a millimeter or two to help make sure it's nice and snug right when we start. All right, and now again, not too tight. Shouldn't be able to pull on it or push through it. Should be pretty good. Go ahead and snap this back around. You want it to be kind of difficult, but not impossible. There we go. It feels nice and tight, and we can take up any extra slack with the tensioner in the back. Now we're gonna carefully make sure that the range of motion is correct. We can move this just a little bit, make sure that the cable is not going to wrap around itself too much, and take it all the way to the other side. See here, it's about to wrap underneath itself, and that's something we want to keep from happening. But as we get all the way to the end of the range of motion there, we see that there's still plenty of wraps on both ends of the motor, plenty of wraps on both ends of the cable. However, we do see there's a little bit of extra cable there, so that just means that it's going to become slack in the future. Not to be confused, so it's slack to the future. Pull that back in. Make sure that's not too bad. And again, we've got some of that slack that we can pull up. So I'm going to get it to a spot where it's easy to access that screw. Unhook it a little bit to make sure that we get plenty of that slack again. Loosen up the screw just a little bit and push it through just a couple of millimeters. There we go. Attach that here. All right, that's nice and tight. All the extra slack is now just up here, which we can carefully take up with the screw. And now it's good as new. So now that we're happy with the length of the cable, the tension of the cable, we've made sure that it's running around all the proper pulleys, it's not wrapped around any of the other cables, then we can go ahead and cut the loose end pretty close to the screw there. And that's it, the elbow.